Welcome back everybody to our weekly Moto news show, and this time we're going to be focusing on the best new cruisers and American style tourers for 2025. You see, in a single week we've had new bike announcements from Harley, Indian and BMW, and so in this video we'll go through them all and pick out the best. On top of that, we'll look at some of the other best new cruisers on the market from other manufacturers, and then to round it all off, we'll find out the results of a poll I ran earlier this week to find out who you think makes the best cruisers and tourers in 2025. So let's kick off with Harley-Davidson, who've made a couple of announcements over the past few weeks. The first of which revealed the returning models to their Grand American Touring lineup. So the Street Glide, Road Glide and Road King Special, and then also some of the Trigs too. So the Road Glide 3, Freewheeler and the Tri Glide Ultra. Now mostly they appear to be pretty much the same year on year, but what they did announce for some of these models is a new factory custom paint and graphics program, which basically allows you to get some of the look and feel of a proper custom paint job, but Harley say without the extra price and lead times that can be associated with using a third party. Now, there are 3 on offer, with the first being called Mystic Shift, and they say this one offers a dramatic hue shift which travels from a dark gunmetal to purple to blue to almost orange, and is especially apparent in full sunlight when walking around the motorcycle. The other though are variations on their Firestorm finish, with flame details set into the paintwork on the fairing, tanks, side panels and the hard case. This one references similar schemes from their first factory flame paint on the 1980 Wide Glide model, and also more recent bikes like the 2011 Wide Glide. Now this one also comes in a dark midnight Firestorm variant and also an orangey whiskey Firestorm, and personally I can't really decide on this one. It partly looks a little bit corny, but then again looks totally apt for a Harley too. So let me know what you think of it down in the comments. More recently though, we've had an absolute flurry of 2025 models, all with their own significant upgrades, and so we'll start first with the cruiser lineup. Now 6 bikes return, so they're Lowrider S, the Lowrider ST, the Breakout, the Heritage Classic, the Fat Boy and the Street Bob, and all of them now get a massively updated tech package. So there's a whole suite of rider aids now, with cornering traction control and cornering ABS, cornering drag torque slip control, cruise control as well, tire pressure monitoring, and pretty much all of those weren't fitted to the previous year model for the cruiser lineup. Take the Heritage Classic as just one example. That only used to have ABS and that was absolutely it. It's the same for some of the other variations as well. And while on the one hand it's probably time that they caught up technologically with some of the competition, on the other, I did kind of like that you could still buy a properly massive V-twin cruiser and have absolutely no nannying or intervention between you and the power. So look, a change for the better? I'd love to know what you think, again, down in the comments. Other than that, you've got minor tweaks to the way that the bikes look in terms of the finishing and stuff like that. Different finishes on the hardware. The Lowriders, for example, get a 2-into-1 exhaust system instead of 2-into-2, so there's some little changes like that. And also, the switchgear has been updated for better ease of use, and they all come now with USB-C charging. So look, a nice little refresh for these models, if not a groundbreaking overhaul. And what I will say, it's very rare that I'd ever commend Harley on pricing, with a lot of these bikes being, 20 grand or over. But in the current climate, it is fairly refreshing to see a price increment for some of them of just 50 or 60 quid, or maybe like £100. Now next up, there's a new addition to the Grand American Touring lineup, and this one's called the Street Glide Ultra, with the Ultra suffix being used plenty of times in the past, and basically it represents a more comfortable touring focused spec with full luggage as standard. This one is definitely at the top end of the budget though. It comes in at £28,495 starting price before you've even specced up a fancy paint job. But you do get, for the money, the tall touring windscreen, the comfort seat, the heated grips, the top box with the backrest, the armrests and the luggage rack, and fairing lowers and saddlebag guards and more. Then in the cockpit, like the standard Street Glide, you still get their massive TFT dash. I think they say it's 312 millimeters in diameter, and that comes with their Skyline OS, which personally I really do like. It's one of my favorite operating systems in terms of TFT dashes on the market, and that brings all the connectivity and stuff like that. Through that, And the menus, you also get to manage all of those cornering TC and ABS and drag torque control settings that we mentioned for the cruiser lineup as well. And then for the engine, well, it's the regular 117 cubic inch version of the M8, so it makes 107 horsepower peak and 175 newton meters of peak torque. And still, that should be enough to get it on the move, although this one probably ain't for the weak of leg at just shy of 400 kilograms in running order. Personally, I actually think this one is a rather handsome looking bike. I really do like the single headlight with the bar mounted fairing, which I think is a bit easier on the eye and probably more broadly palatable than the big wide headlight on the Road Glide. And then with the black hardware, some of the new paint jobs, I do think it all comes together really quite nicely. Now, CVO stands for Custom Vehicle Operations at Harley, and it represents their most high-spec, high-tech, high-finish and high-priced models with a new treatment for specific bikes every year. And they say this is their 26th installment now, with updates to the CVO Street Glide, the CVO Road Glide, as well as the more sporty, King of the Baggers inspired Road Glide ST. There are certainly some pretty pop-in paint jobs for this year as well, especially that Road Glide in the blue streak. But I gotta say, the tastiest bike of the bunch has to be that ST model with the carbon bodywork and the wavy disc, the lightweight cast wheels and the black hardware with some little pops of red, all of which do make for a really special looking bike. Don't get too excited though if you like what you see, because all three of those bikes start at over £40,000. This one isn't part of the cruiser lineup or the tourer lineup, but I do have to give a quick mention to the Pan America Adventure bike, which also gets an update to the CVO version for 2025 with a new carbon blue paint job with some camo graphic details. This CVO version comes as standard with full luggage, with crash bars, with auxiliary lights and more. And to be honest, when they announced the first version of this CVO Pan America last year, I was kind of wondering if anyone was actually going to buy one. It was a bike that I didn't really expect to see out in the wild. Fast forward though, a couple of months, and one parked directly next to me at the sort of ticket line for ABR Festival, and I've got to admit, it did really stand out from a crowd of GSs and Teneres and Tigers and stuff like that. I quite like the sort of vibrancy of the finish. Maybe it's something I'd like to see from more adventure bike manufacturers. And so yeah, I'll be very interested to see if I see any of these new 2025 bikes out on the road as well. On top of that though, they've released another Pan America variant, and this one is a new hot ST version, which is entirely road focused and as such gets cast wheels with a smaller 17-inch front. So effectively you can think of this as sort of Harley's answer to the Multistrada V4 Pikes Peak. And again, I'm not sure this is necessarily a bike that anyone's been screaming out for, but then as with the CVO, I've been proven wrong in the past. Last up for Harley though, there's the Sportster S, which I still think is one of the weirdest, coolest, concepty looking bikes on the market, with that super low slung stance, a bit of a flat track influence with the seat and the pipes, and then this humongous front wheel which basically makes no sense out on the road but does look flipping awesome. The main issue though with this bike had to be the suspension, because it had absolutely F-all travel, both front and rear, and so that meant if you hit a pothole or something like that, your spine certainly knew about it in an instant. In fact, I looked up the specs. It had just 92 millimeters of travel on the fork, but then a minuscule 51 millimeters on the shock, and that made it pretty uncomfortable for anything but marble smooth roads. And this might not be news to anybody, but marble smooth roads aren't something you find a lot of here in the UK. Harley must have noticed this as well though, or gotten some customer feedback, because this new 2025 version gets 60% more travel at both ends, and they say they've done that without affecting the super low seat height of 765mm. So yeah, sounds very good to me. It's like a very needed improvement. The only thing that's a little bit of a shame is that they got rid of some of those bronze engine covers, which really did give it a bit of a distinctive look. They're black now, which looks a bit more generic, but still overall I'd say it's a really interesting looking bike. So what do you think? Have Harley nailed it with their new 2025 lineup, or could they have done more to keep it fresh? Personally, didn't really see that ST version of the Pan America coming. That was a bit of a surprise, but I'd love to know what you think again down in the comments. Now look, before we get on to the Indians and the BMWs, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Calimoto for supporting the channel and making videos like this one possible. You see, most of these cruisers are really very simple in terms of tech. There's not much going on in the cockpit, and so if you do want to add all the latest features, including, decent navigation, then we'd recommend mounting your phone with a quad lock and checking out Calimoto's excellent app. The key thing is they've got their own dedicated algorithm which picks out the best motorcycle-specific curvy routes, and that means you never have to ride a boring road again. That said, you can still switch to a fast mode if you really do want to get somewhere quick, and so really it's the perfect companion both for longer tours in new locations where you want to find the best routes, but also for back home if you want to mix up your local rides and find new combinations. Genuinely, we love using the Calimoto app here at MOTOBOB, and so I fully recommend checking out the links down in the description to find out more, and also down there you'll find a couple of discount codes specifically for our viewers. One is for a free trial of their premium features, and the other gets you a discount on a membership should you decide to take one out. And so once again, a massive thanks to Calimoto for their support, and with that, let's take a look at the Indians. Now, already announced for 2025, we've got the new Scout 60s, which follow on from a major redesign of the full-fat Scout lineup from 2024. And the key thing is they get a smaller 999cc V-twin with 84 horsepower peak that can be limited down to 47 for A2 license holders. On top of that though, to make these bikes more accessible both in terms of the ride and ownership, they come in quite a bit cheaper as well. So the bobber of the 60 comes in at 11 grand and the classic at 11,695, and so that's basically a couple of grand less than the more powerful 1250 equivalents. Also announced a couple of months back, there's the 2025 Springfield Special Edition, which absolutely maximizes the heritage vibe with all the chrome and all that good stuff to celebrate this model signing off. So this is going to be the last iteration that will ever go on sale. Now at 25 grand, for pretty much everyone that's quite a lot of money. But you do get their punchy Thunderstroke 116 air-cooled engine, that classic Indian paint job, like I say, lashings of chrome all over the hardware, and some brown leather on the seat just to finish it off. You've got luggage, floorboards, a windscreen, and a passenger backrest, so it should be really quite comfy. And also, if you're looking for something with the maximum possible exclusivity, well, just 50 of these will be made worldwide, and just one single bike will actually make its way to the UK for sale. Also updated for 2025, we've got the Roadmaster Elite, with the Elite lineup effectively being Indian's equivalent to Harley's CVO. And as such, you've got similarly high prices. Again, this one's just shy of 40 grand, but it does look rather smart in that dedicated blue candy paint job with the Elite graphics and badging, and also finished off with some gold pinstripes. Tech gets the works. You get their heated and cooled seats, remote lock-in 3-piece luggage, and their Ride Command infotainment system, which is hooked up to their Powerband audio system, which has 12 speakers dotted all around the bike, which hopefully for most people should be enough. On top of all those bikes they've already announced though, today they made another announcement, and this one comes with the update of their liquid-cooled Power Plus engine, which gets a boosting capacity from 108 cubic inches up to 112, so I think that's about 1.7 litres up to 1.8. This now means, being a Revy liquid-cooled V-twin, that it can make 126 horsepower peak and also 181 newton meters of peak torque, which is pretty massive. I think it's the most out of any bike we've looked at so far. Perhaps most significantly though, they've rolled this engine out to 2 new bikes, because previously it was built for the Challenger, which is a sort of sporty bagger style bike. That was followed by the full touring spec Pursuit, but for 2025, both the Chieftain and the Roadmaster, which were previously powered by that air-cooled Thunderstroke, are now available with this liquid-cooled beast. So it marks a bit more of a modern direction for a couple of bikes that were still kinda largely leaning towards the traditional, and as you'd expect, that comes with a bunch of new tech, including blind spot, tailgate, and rear collision warnings, courtesy of a rear-facing radar, which sits just above the license plate there at the back. Then they also inherit some of the more sporty spec of the Challenger and Pursuit, so you've now got the upside-down fork, the radial Brembo brakes, and so one would expect, despite still being really quite substantial bikes. I think they're up around the 400 kilo mark as well. They'll be improved in terms of handling. Rounding off Indian's 2025 updates though, we've got the Chiefs, which I guess are equivalent to the Harley Cruiser lineup. Again, powered by the air-cooled Thunderstroke 116, and still starting with the Chief Dark Horse. That's the kind of default choice in the Chief lineup. On top of that though, again, you've got the Chief Bobber Dark Horse with the chunky bobber style wheels, the Super Chief with the traditional look and the soft luggage for more of a classic vibe. And that's where you'll find one of the updates for 2025, in that this one is also now available in a Dark Horse variant, so it gets the fully blacked out hardware that give it a bit more of a mean look. On top of that, you've still got the Sport Chief, which gets a little bit of a half fairing, upside down forks for better suspension response, twin discs up front for better stopping, and this one's also been announced in an RT edition for 2025, which is largely the same but adds a few accessories like some high-mounted side cases, a high bolster seat, and also forward foot controls. So that rounds off Indian for 2025. I think the biggest update has to be the improvement of the Power Plus engine and those new versions of the Chieftain and Roadmaster. But again, let me know what you think of these new offerings down in the comments below. Look, I don't think it's any coincidence that all these bikes have been announced at the same time. They're clearly competing for headlines and then subsequently sales. And BMW have got in on the action as well with their R18 lineup, which is almost entirely built to target that lucrative American audience. Thing is though, I don't think it's necessarily been a hugely successful project so far. I mean, you see them regularly discounted here in the UK anyway, but perhaps some of these tweaks for the new model year might just push it in the right direction. Now, the R18 engine is a humongous air and oil cooled 1.8 litre boxer twin, and so I guess that does give it a point of differentiation in that it's got its own distinctive character versus a market that's dominated by V-twins. For 2025, of course, they've had to update it like many other manufacturers to meet the latest Euro 5 Plus emissions regulations, but also at the same time they've taken the chance to bump up peak torque by another 5 Newton meters, so it now makes a very healthy 163 Newton meters peak at 3,000 RPM, and they say there's more than 150 Newton meters available all the way from 2,000 RPM to 4,000, which is where you're going to spend most of your time riding out on the road. There are 5 variants in this lineup though, all of which get updates for the new model year. So we'll start with the standard R18, which gets a bit of a visual refresh with more modern mudguards both at the front and rear, a bigger 18-inch rear wheel that replaces the 16-incher, a new spoke pattern on both the wheels as well, and then the removal of the traditional fork shrouds. To me, it really feels like it's pushing more so into that Harley Cruiser or Indian Chief image, as opposed to the more BMW heritage-inspired approach that they started out with. That's especially true if you go for the blacked-out hardware option, which again is new for 2025, and it also sounds like they've tried to target comfort on the bike with more padding on the seat and also revised suspension settings. And I will admit, having reviewed a few of the R18s, cushiness wasn't necessarily one of their strong points. Lastly, the daytime running light feature and the USB-C charging socket now come fitted as standard. Next up, we've got the R18 Classic, which used to have a bobber-style chunky front tyre wrapped around a 16-inch rim, and that's now been replaced with a bigger 19-incher, and naturally that's required them to redesign the front mudguard, and they've given it a bit of a flick for that heritage look. And again, with this one, you've got the option to have the blacked out hardware, and also you get the standard DRL and USB. The R18 Roctane, well, that's more of a custom bagger kind of vibe, and this one now gets a new finish for 2025, so you can get it in two-tone Dragonfire red metallic, and also some of the engine hardware like the pushrod sleeves, I think, are now finished in dark chrome. The R18B and R18 Transcontinental are more so like a big American tourer. They've got the full fairing and all the electronics in there as well, and plenty of wing coverage. The B is the bagger version, the Transcontinental is with full luggage, and both get a few new finishes along with the addition of a favorites button, which I think is a really good thing. I've tried this out on some of BMW's other bikes, and it basically means you can quickly access some of your favorite features like heated grips or seat without having to navigate all the way through the menus. So look, some neat little updates here and there, but I'd say probably the most modest of the 3 manufacturers that we've looked at so far, and that's got me wondering, is this really enough to start winning some sales from the other 2 in the States? I honestly think the vastly different engine character is probably going to be a sticking point for anyone thinking about switching over, and so really shuffling around the spec and styling isn't going to massively change their minds. Or maybe I'm wrong, and actually, like I say, the distinctive Boxer Twin is actually a strength, and so I'd love to know what you think of these ones down in the comments. As for what we've got elsewhere from other manufacturers, well, for me, probably the most exciting new cruiser is from Triumph with the revival of the Bobber TFC, mainly because as a special edition that doesn't necessarily cost that much more than the standard bike, it actually brings a bunch of meaningful upgrades. For example, they've switched back to the bigger diameter front wheel for slightly better handling. Brakes are upgraded to some radial 4-pot monoblock Brembos with a radial master cylinder too. Suspension is top spec Öhlins with a fully adjustable fork and shock, and also you get some Akropovich silencers. Now granted, the clip-on style handlebars do look a little bit at odds with the general cruiser riding experience, but I will say, having filmed it at the factory a couple of months back and having had the opportunity to sit on it, it was much more natural and intuitive feeling in the ergonomics than I was expecting from looking at it. Triumph also announced a limited edition Evel Knievel version of the Rocket 3, so that's worth a look if that's your sort of thing. And then the other update of note is probably the Rebel lineup from Honda. Both the 500 and the 1100 are now available in SE versions, which has injected some much needed colour and pizzazz. And also the 1100 now gets a full colour TFT dash along with some revisions to the DCT system. So if you're looking for an automatic cruiser, then that's definitely good news because that was your only option really. And while it did used to be a little bit choppy at low speeds on and off the throttle, and with it being a DCT you don't have a clutch to feather it out, well hopefully this update smooths it out a little bit and makes it more usable day to day. Now of course there are plenty of other cruisers on the market, but I think that rounds off the most meaningful updates for 2025. And so that begs the question, well, who makes the best cruisers and Americana style Tourers this year? Now, this is a poll that I put out a few days ago, and it's actually got quite a lot of votes at 7,100 so far. And I was pretty surprised to see that this isn't marginal, by far and away, the winner of this poll with 42% was Indian. Triumph came in second. I've mentioned the Bobber and the Rocket 3, both of those are popular bikes, although there could be a slight Triumph bias in my audience given my bike history. Then Harley came in third, and then BMW, perhaps unsurprisingly, last place. Still, that winner genuinely surprised me, but I think the proof is always going to be in the riding, and so we'll be trying to get hold of as many of these bikes to review this year and really find out who makes the best. But in the meantime, I'll put last week's episode of this show on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch. If you didn't see it, we focus more so on new bikes from KTM, Livewire, Triumph, and potentially an update for the Goldwing. Do hit subscribe as well if you enjoyed this one and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here from MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next one.